It's so easy to take a picture. With some luck, you can take a fairly good picture. But what if you wanted more than a fairly good picture? What if you wanted a work of art? Winston Link wanted to make works of art. He would do it by photographing moving objects in the dead of night. And this would set the stage for a unique style of photography. Who was this man, and how did he create a remarkable body of work? Link was trained to be a civil engineer. He taught himself photography, and he taught himself well enough that he never worked as a civil engineer. He was successful early on as a commercial and industrial photographer. Along with providing the routine shots his clients required, Link developed a reputation for staging photos that told stories or posed and answered questions. In this photo, the product being advertised isn't even visible. Tough flex glass withstands the twin forces of fire and ice, not to mention the weight of a model who has no desire to plunge into flames. In 1955, Link was in Stanton, Virginia, working a photo shoot for Westinghouse. He knew that Norfolk and Western had become the last railway to operate exclusively on steam power, and he knew the railroad built their own locomotives at shops in Roanoke, 80 miles to the south. Link took a trip to the tracks at Waynesboro, near Stanton, made a batch of test photos and sent them to Norfolk and Western and pitched a photo project. Management at N&W headquarters liked the idea from the beginning and gave Link access to railway property, employees, timetables, and communications, but did not provide financial support. Although this meant that Link would have to bankroll the project himself, it also meant that the railroad wasn't the client he needed to please, which meant that he had total artistic control. Link never fully explained why he took on this project. To understand why he conceived the project, it might help to understand the professional boundaries of a commercial photographer. Whether it was advertising and marketing photos or industrial images, Link's job as a commercial photographer was to discover and then meet the tastes and the needs of his clients. In other words, as a commercial photographer, he never shot for himself. The steam train project would be different. He would be his own art director. Whatever motivated him, nobody at the time, including Link, knew it would become over 5 years one of the most monumental photo projects ever undertaken and completed by one man. He would work from Roanoke, then headquarters of Norfolk and Western, and from there he would work north of town through the Shenandoah Valley and south of town through coal country. And the search was on for the right spot, for the right shot. The kind of natural arrangements of horizontals, verticals, diagonals, and curves that make for arresting compositions. Link was 41 years old when he began the project. He would make 9 long-term trips to the region, usually working with one of his 2 assistants, George Tom or Corky Zyder. He would return with more than 2,400 images. He would spend more time on Norfolk and Western property than anywhere else in his life except New York City. Like any artist worthy of the title, Link pushed his personal limits by creating challenges for himself and then resolving them. He would work at night because He said, "I can't move the sun, and I can't even move the tracks. So I had to create my own environment through lighting." He would shape his own scenes and frame them with darkness. How do you light up a scene that covers an acre or more? And how do you do it when you are far from any power source? We put these questions to Stephanie Klein Davis, photojournalist, freelance photographer, and photography teacher in Roanoke, Virginia, home today to the O. Winston Link Museum, and to Lindsay Alley, museum manager of the Historical Society of Southwest Virginia.
A lot of what we have on view here in the Shenandoah Gallery is equipment actually used by O. Winston Link, and actually most of it was specially designed by him and for this specific N&W project.
So tell me, how did the lights go off with no electricity?
So Link was out shooting in a lot of rural locations, and so he had a special sort of battery contraption that's also on display, created so that he could have battery power while he was out in these remote places with no electricity anywhere nearby. The red box here that we have on display is the power supply. It is a battery capacitor unit. It held a battery that was large enough to fire off multiple cameras, up to 3, as well as several light reflectors in synchronization. The power supply was the technological heart of Winston Link's success. It was used on such a large scale, and it had to be guarded day and night when he traveled to make sure that he was able to continue making photos. In order to connect his cameras and flash bulbs, all his equipment when he was out taking these photos, he had to use a lot of wire, obviously. This wire was 14 gauge, similar to sort of a heavy lamp cord. The flash bulbs were wired in a series, not unlike Christmas lights, sort of daisy chained together. He would set up so many flash bulbs to take one single photo that it would sometimes require up to a mile of wire.
I know this equipment is ancient, but I have never seen so many bulbs behind a reflector.
Right.
And I don't think I could go online and even find this stuff.
It was specifically made to Link's specifications to hold more flash bulbs than a normal reflector would. Since he was shooting primarily at night, he really had to light it up.
And I know that it's been said that really it would be very difficult to reproduce his images because of the amount of light he used,
Yes.
even with current day strobes.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that the beauty of current day lighting is that you can get multiple shots.
Yeah.
You know, just it keeps recycling
Yeah.
the battery. In this case, no.
Did have a camera specially made for the N&W project in particular that could shoot up to 1/250th of a second, which in the 1950s was just unheard of.
You need a fast shutter speed like that to capture any kind of action. Otherwise, your motion's going to blur, right?
Right.
But so is this the camera?
Yes.
So that
is at least one that he used.
this camera is similar to the one that O. Winston Link used. It looks like a little black box, and it's pretty compact. You can carry it with the strap here. I've mounted it to a tripod to stabilize it. And initially, it's hard to figure out how it opens. Like, where is the camera? And there's a little dimple in this box right here that I pop. And this comes down. This one's really old and dusty. And then you have to reach in and there's a little lever and you pull gently and you pull it out, and these are the bellows. It's like an accordion. And that determines your focal length, your distance from your subject. So this is the lens on the front, and the light goes through the lens, and depending on how wide the opening is on the lens, which is known as the f-stop or aperture, determines how sharp things are into the distance. The length of time that that opening stays open is determined by what's called the shutter speed. And that is operated by a contraption that works from the back of the camera and has a mirror. The business of the mirror is for it to flip the image, because as the image comes in, it comes in upside down. And the mirror allows the photo to be turned right side up when it's exposed to the film. Link would have his 2 sheets of film in this little holder, and so he could take one picture on one side and then flip it over inside the camera and take another picture, and there's a black slide that will block it. And then the negative lives inside here, but it's protected until he comes into the dark room. Now these lights would not be on. It would have to be pitch black when he's loading his film to develop it. And this is sheet film. And after he develops the film, it could be developed in either a tank or in a tray, but it still needs to be light tight. Once the film is completely developed, then you have a negative. And so you end up putting the negative inside of this holder, and it slides into the enlarger up here, and light projects down from the top of the enlarger onto the photo paper. And what he would do is he would preview it before printing. So he could turn the light on with the timer, and he put his paper in here and line it up how he wants it, and he can see the picture projected down because it projects as a positive. This print was most likely one of his first ones of this image, where it looks nice, it's got a lot of tonal range, however it's flat. Nothing's really popping, the highlights aren't really popping. So what he probably decided was to either put a filter on to make it more contrasty, or use a higher grade paper, which often is graded for different contrasts.
Okay.
So, and if you notice the difference between this photo and this photo is this has got richer blacks and whiter whites. And so he's used either the higher grade filter or the higher grade paper.
Are these train pictures with people in the foreground? Or are they people pictures with trains in the background? Or are these pictures of people living side by side with laboring, smoke-breathing, domesticated giants? Winston spurned solitary shots of trains, calling them mere hardware shots. People he knew would bring life and spirit to the images. They would also create a sense of scale. He used real people, the proud and independent railroad families who lived and worked near the railroad. It wasn't difficult for Winston to persuade everyday people into posing for shots the likes of which they'd never seen. His enthusiasm for this deeply personal work animated people, and pose they did in ways that grew ever more imaginative. Link's images would anticipate the product placement methods of Madison Avenue, especially in auto advertising, by years, as the ever-present train was blended with the lives of people. The blending crossed a wide artistic spectrum, from Norman Rockwell-esque domestic scenes to dramatic film noir. To cinematic action shots. To playful or clever shots that reward an observant, careful viewer. And the blending could be oh so subtle. A stretch of Virginia became Link's second home as he was welcomed into people's homes, then welcomed back as a mutual respect grew. Link was a superb athlete. He was an outstanding hockey player as a youth, and he remained fit as an adult. He needed to be. A railroad right-of-way is about as far away as you can get from the comfort of a photography studio. The athleticism came in handy and allowed Link to access the best position for a shot. It could mean the difference between an adequate shot and a special shot. Once the site was chosen, the equipment had to get there. Hours would be spent arranging lights and cameras in every weather. And then the waiting would begin. Until the shot arrived. A landscape painter can capture an image of what a scene looks like simply by observing. The artist looks, the easel is placed, and there it is. But how does an artist paint a picture of what a scene will look like? We're here at Hawksbill Creek in Luray, Virginia, to search for an answer.
Link came here initially during the day to scope out the scene, and he saw the dynamic lines created from the bridges and the shapes created from the girders and other elements in the image, and he got a good sense of what he needed to return to because he was going to be photographing at night. He had to light up over an acre of space to create an outdoor stage. He used his lighting to accentuate the elements on the bridges and to allow the rest of the scene to fall into darkness. Many artists know that often elements in an image should be in threes to create shape and form and proper composition. So he was looking for these triangles. So he had two groups of people in the water, separated by a little bit of space, and they were splashing water, so he had two big splashes. And then, as the engine drove past, with the smoke billowing into the air, that was the third poof of white that created the tip of the triangle. He left most of the bank dark so that your eye would go to the people in the frame that are splashing water down below in the creek. Under the railroad bridge, he lit the stone wall. He gathered locals who lived nearby to pose in the water. And they were good sports about it because it was at night and they had to wait around to make sure that the train was coming through at the right time.
Today, Winston Link's railway work is widely understood to be documentary, although Link didn't dwell much on that aspect of his project when he was interviewed in later life. Link was a storyteller, and this was his chance to tell the stories he wanted, and he did. His train images far surpass any commercial work he ever produced. When his talents for engineering, advertising, and photography were combined under his own direction, the photography was elevated to art. Yet, like everyone else, he knew the sun was setting on the steam era, and he also knew the many whistle-stop hamlets along the track would go dark too. Steam power requires a substantial employee base. Control towers and water towers and coal towers and maintenance crews had to be ready down the line. The people who worked them lived near the tracks and the towers. When diesel power replaced steam, the jobs, the people, and the hamlets would melt away. The deliberate documentary work is there too, mostly in the daytime scenes. And the affectionate portraits of rail employees on the job. Perhaps the Winston Link project can more easily be understood as an unintentional documentary of a way of life that is long gone. Unintentional because Link understood the only way to depict authentic life under the conditions he created for himself was to stage it. From our perspective today, it can seem as though the trains in Link's photos are saying goodbye. And that's because they were.